Hello, and welcome to our show, Crooked Doctors. We're live. This is Friday, November 18th, 2011. If you'd like to ask us a question, you can give us a call at 212-245-7273. We're very fortunate to have a guest in the studio today, Mr. David Hunter. And Mr. David Hunter is an architect. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Well, one of the things that Mr. LeBeau, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Keith LeBeau.
So, as you know, Mr. LeBeau helps me, and the 911 first responders help me. The title of my show is Crooked Doctors, and as you know, I'm exposing crime and corruption with some crooked doctors. And one of the dishonest people I'm compelled to deal with is a municipal court judge named Judge Nino Falcone from North Bergen, New Jersey. Nino Falcone threatened me. He did me the great good favor of threatening me in writing, and he acted on his threats. So
it was not a good favor.
No, a municipal court judge should not threaten a nice person like me and then act on his threats. So I have to go to New Jersey to
respond,
to do what I need to do. And Mr. LeBeau comes with me because we were threatened by the Jersey police. So the 911 first responders say, what can we do to protect you? And I say, well, I need a bodyguard from time to time, no problem. We'll be with you. We're a phone call away, don't worry. And so I asked them and I said, well, what kinds of things can I do to say thank you to the 911 first responders? Because otherwise I'd probably be dead today. So if it weren't for heroic men like Mr. LeBeau, and people of good conscience, like the men and women of the Nassau County Civic Association. So because they also helped me and they provided me with pro bono attorneys and a forum to speak. And when they had a big meeting, they invited me and they said, give out your flyers, tell people your story, ask people to make phone calls for you. People did. There was one member of the Nassau County Civic Association who was fighting crime and corruption in his own experience, and he actually got out of a hospital bed with a concussion to keep fighting. So these are people who had experience. He was in the construction industry. And there was another gentleman I met at the Nassau County Civic Association who spent all kinds of money fighting crime and corruption, and now it's his private hobby. That's a great big money suck, but he does it anyway. So I asked the 911 first responders, what kinds of things can I do to say thank you for protecting my life, literally? And they said, well, we want two things. We would like airtime. I'm like, no problem. And we'd like information, preferably in the form of expert witnesses. Hence your appearance here today. So Mr. David Hunter is an architect. You've been an architect for 40 years. You've owned your own company for 30 years?
25 plus. 1984 we started.
Very good. So he's going to give us some insights into the kinds of materials that were incinerated. It was aerosoled at 911. But before we talk about that, what we're going to do is look at Mr. David Hunter's website, which is phenomenal, and establish the fact that he is a fabulous expert in witness. He's hip, he's smart, he's savvy, he's an ocean of wisdom. He dresses better than most of the attorneys, and they hate him for it. So let's look at his website.
Oh my God.
So here's his website. And this is David Hunter Architects. And we're going to look at some of your services. This is your website. And here's some of your services. This is what you do. One of the reasons why here we go, expert legal testimony and witness. And one of the reasons why you're very good at this is because you actually help to redesign office buildings. We're going to go to your projects right now. You actually help to design financial trading floors.
Yes. Okay.
And I believe when I was looking through this, you actually helped a firm move into the World Trade Center. Is that correct?
Years ago, yes.
Okay, so you're familiar with the World Trade Center.
Yeah. Yes.
And these are you help. Do you want to speak a little bit about how you help redesign and design financial trading floors? And
yeah, well, the traders need a very special environment And in turn, this gets into the lighting, gets into the workspace, the actual space per person, the people next to them, et cetera, it's the adjacencies. And so anyway, and also the desks have to be very specialized. So anyway, the result is that on trading floors alone, it's a real discipline all unto itself. And then there are various other aspects involved in the financial services. You have, as an example, I believe we just went by interns, but anyway, they actually have a specialized subset of requirements for interns, no less yet, and then that's different from the regular, partners, etc. But also, the financial services business has grown tremendously in the past 20 years, much more than it started off as, and
I wasn't aware that they needed special lighting and to be a trader.
Well, I think they do. And I say that because, without kidding, a lot of the facilities people tell me to go down on the lighting. That is to say, to not worry about it. But in turn, they will request everything. I've had, among other things, we had one partner who actually requested that the building go out and polish down the window glass that was in front of him because the glass had some scratches in it, and this fellow didn't want to be distracted by the scratches, no less yet.
Oh, wow.
So, some of the requests are kind of extraordinary, that's all I can say.
Okay.
They're not always extraordinary, but some of them are.
And when I looked at some of your projects, I mean, it was great. You even did work for Mount Sinai, right?
Yeah,
Here in your
Yes,
healthcare?
exactly. Oh, that's years ago, yep.
So you did work for Brooklyn Physical Therapy Center. You did work for NYU. We love NYU. Yay, NYU.
Yeah, exactly
Mount
right.
Sinai.
Right.
So your projects are phenomenal. And these are some of them right here. So you're an expert at what you do, and one of the reasons
I like to think. Anyway.
no, I think you're well established that you're an expert at what you do.
Very impressive on a lot of your design features. Not only the design features, just how far you're willing to go for the customer themselves. Is even to design the furniture itself for them.
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
I thought the furniture thing was great. Let's look
That's
at that.
Well, trading desks are,
Yeah, right
as
here.
I said, it's
Custom furniture.
a discipline unto itself.
When you were doing the roll top desks, right
Yeah,
here.
right.
And you actually
The drawings that we produce for the roll top desks are classics. That is to say, people use the drawings all over the place. It's beyond belief. There are no drawings quite like those.
so you really do go the beyond the call of duty.
Right.
But what I found very interesting was when we were talking, when I first met you,
Right.
You were talking to me about the plastic pipes
Among other things, right.
that were at the World Trade Center, and when they were incinerated, they released chlorine into the air, which combines with water vapor
Yeah, right.
to form hydrochloric acid.
Yes.
Which would be what the 911 first responders would have inhaled, like Mr. LeBeau. So you're inhaling hydrochloric acid into your lungs, and it's eating into your lungs.
Causing severe scarring. It can actually probably cause things like fibrosis.
And you have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease now.
Yes, I do.
Now, we were talking a little bit before the show.
Sure, right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, tell our viewing audience a little bit about the hydrochloric acid in the plastic?
Exactly right. Well, as mentioned, the hydrochloric acid, when it gets into the lungs, actually takes a while to become really active. That is to say, it literally eats the lungs away. So really, even a healthy dose, that is a dose that will kill a person, would take, let's say, a month roughly. Mm-hmm. And in turn, by that we mean the person starts off healthy, and then they begin to wonder, hey, what's wrong? You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, things begin to happen to them. Their lungs fail them, literally. And then eventually they die. And by the way, the World Trade Center, I think, probably doesn't have exposures that would kill people immediately. But any exposure at all, once you get the hydrochloric acid in your lungs, you've got a problem.
So one of the things that one of the substances that the 911 first responders would have inhaled is hydrochloric acid, as when during the first few hours. But they wouldn't. When we were talking before the show, you were talking about how they were breathing the stuff in, and it would take a few weeks before they would.
At the very least, because again, they're probably not breathing in heavy quantities, because if they breathed in very heavy quantities, they would die guaranteed
Right.
within a month. But so that they have it is something that is probably not easy to recognize, although it's there. And the other thing too, which we also mentioned before the show, is that the Port Authority insists that for any of their properties, they govern rather than the New York City Department of Buildings. So plastic piping, which
So
is
wait,
definitely...
let's help the audience
Oh.
understand. So at the World Trade Center site, it's the Port Authority's word that rules.
Yes, exactly right. Their rules govern everything, including the construction.
The building codes.
Exactly right.
So the buildings around 911 are subjected to city rules, but
Yes.
but the 911 buildings that came down at the World Trade Center, they were exempt through Port Authority.
Yes.
So get ahead, tell us some more about how they exempted themselves. And go ahead.
Yeah, it obviously saves them a lot of money and a lot of time, but at the same time, it also affects anyone that works in the buildings. So as an example, even casual workers would be exposed to things in the world, in the World Trade Center that they would not be exposed to anywhere else because the rules are entirely different.
Irrespective of the 911 event.
Exactly, without even talking about 911. Literally, every time you open up a ceiling in one of these buildings, you have a different set of potentialities from what you would experience anywhere else in the city.
So was there a lot of PVC pipe in the 911 buildings?
That I don't know, and I don't mean to say that categorically that was the case, but what I'm also suggesting is that you save a lot of money if you don't, if you can substitute metal pipe for polyvinyl chloride, point one, and point two. I've actually seen plumbers around the city actually paint PVC plastic piping to look like metal piping just in order to save the cost, in order to install the thing, point one. Point two, they may have been given an exemption because, again, the Port Authority is a law unto itself.
Have you read the studies for 911 on
I've looked at them. I've got some of the studies with me, but mostly the studies I've read are about the actual impact of the airplanes, which were really serious, rather than the effect on the first responders. So I don't mean to say that I'm expert on all the aspects of first response, but I have reviewed a large part of the material based on the actual jet planes crashing into the building and the effect that they had.
In addition to things like hydrochloric acid,
right?
What kinds of other things would the 911 first responders have breathed in? Asbestos?
Well, obviously, because to be effective as a fire protection agent, asbestos, I believe, can go from 2 to 8% of the actual spray-on material. But the notion about spray-on is entirely beside what is done what is done in a lot of other places. In that the spray-on itself can be easily dislodged, without even worrying about airplane crashes. Just scratching it can knock it off.
Yeah, just even bumping into it.
Exactly right. And every time it comes off, it leaves a trail, and that trail is part of what was breathed in by the people responding, and indeed by anyone who works in the trade center, not just the people responding.
So the 911 first responders are breathing in all kinds of stuff: hydrochloric acid,
right.
cyanide,
asbestos, PVCs. PAHs, PCBs, lead, zinc, mercury.
Well,
Remember, the PCBs can be extraordinarily dangerous.
How can they be dangerous?
Because they actually get in. They're not just dangerous unto themselves. They're mutagenic. They actually affect your ability to pass on genes that are properly constructed. They actually change your genes.
So
it's called mutagenic.
So if they're mutagenic, you would be past whatever you inhaled. If you had children, you
eventually,
would
yeah, exactly right.
You pass on, like, you could be perfectly healthy. You breathe this stuff in, or you ingest it somehow, like through the skin, or maybe through water, or through eating something while you're there. What'll happen is the birth defects will show up in the first and second generations.
So are the 911's first responders being told that the PVCs, is that what we're
no, PCBs.
PCBs, I'm sorry.
Polychlorinated biphenyls.
Okay. Are they being told
PCBs.
PCBs?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Are they being told that the PCBs could affect their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren?
Nothing's being said.
Yeah, right.
Otherwise, this would have been all over the newspapers. It would have been in a lot more studies, and it would have been told to all of us.
So why do you think that they're not talking about it? Because of
Potential lawsuit, legal actions, yeah.
Huge legal actions.
I think that's a huge disservice to our 911 first responders, don't you? I mean, particularly, when we go down, we have the support of, for example, the marshals will help us out from time to time, and we deal with the men and the women. Are the women being told that there's a potential?
Any person that responded, that was there in some kind of capacity, whether it was a volunteer, somebody passing out water, or somebody in the buildings cleaning, or somebody like me that was on the pile, we're not being told this.
Not only that, but you have the Secretary of the EPA, Christine Todd Whitman, claiming at the time that there was absolutely no danger whatsoever. The place was 100% clean and healthful. I remember that very well. And actually, she's been brought up on this repeatedly, and she's always defended her position. Although, again, she actually did what the administration told her to do. And that was just malevolent.
I remember actually witnessing her giving her testimony in D.C.
Yes.
During the beginning stages.
And she lied from beginning to end, and she got away with it. Nothing is. It's been brought up repeatedly, but she continues to lie and get away with it.
Well, to be fair, what can you possibly tell people? I mean, I'm going to defend Christine Todd Whitman just a little bit, because what can you? They've never. The government has never experienced this, and now you're going to tell people you can't breathe the air. You'll have mass panic.
Well, what would have happened?
At the very least, they should have had masks, which were not handed out, as I recall.
The only thing that was handed out was the paper the paper masks.
Right.
What we should have actually had, if OSHA had been able to step in, it's called a level 4 containment suit.
Okay.
It means it's called Tyvek. You put on a Tyvek suit. Then you put a special pair of boots on.
Yeah, special breathing apparatus.
Those
also.
boots are wrapped with tape onto the Tyvek. And then what happens is there's an oxygen tank put on you, and then you put into another outfit that looks like from one of the movies.
From Mars.
Yeah, it looks like it's something from a movie where they talk about viruses. It looks like one of those.
And how much?
A level
and how much would have that cost for? I don't know, 3,000 people.
It would have been a lot of money, but it would have potentially saved a lot of people.
I know, but do you think the reason it wasn't provided was because of the cost?
Also, it affects the time, if I may also.
Yeah, it does, because it limits the amount of time you can actually spend in the area.
So therefore, it would have taken much longer to clean up the site.
So we could. How much longer would it have taken?
Years.
Wow.
It would have literally taken years, because when you put on those containment outfits, the most you can spend is 20 to 30 minutes before you have to come back out, be decontaminated,
so
taken out, and then.
So this could have been like a financial nightmare. It would be going on forever. I mean, it
could be, yes.
So for expediency's sake, they suspended all job site rules and just sent us in.
So that gives credence to the 911 first responders' contention that they were considered expendable.
Expendable, yes.
That's
a big hit.
Very sobering. Yeah, it's very sobering when your government says, well, how many 911 responders are we talking about? 5,000 people?
No.
10,000 people?
The amount of responders that were actually there within the first few days was 50 to 75,000.
So what our government is saying is that these people are expendable.
They said we were expendable, yes. They said we cannot afford to have Wall Street down. Wall Street must get back up and running as soon as possible. We have to suspend all job site rules, and this has to become a rescue in the beginning, and then a recovery operation. Then we have to do the removal.
Were you guys aware that your government was saying that you're expendable when you were down there?
No, we had no outside contact. There was no information coming in. It was like I don't know if you guys remember this when they brought, because I learned about this afterwards, when they brought the USS Kennedy into the area. We couldn't see because of the way the air was. You couldn't see, and all of a sudden you heard jets. And as soon as we heard jets, people started yelling, "We're under attack!" And we were just running all over the place, because we didn't know what was going on. We thought we were under attack. We just witnessed 2 buildings get destroyed in front of us. And next thing you know, you're hearing jets. We're thinking World War III is starting. So, we just started running. And then when somebody yelled out, hey, it's ours. It's from the Kennedy. Everybody just stopped, started yelling. You know, they were going, yeah, and everybody just, you know, collected their thoughts again, and we just went right back in and did what we had to do.
Now, Mr. Hunter, when I was talking about my experience before the show working in the pharmaceutical industry, and it's often true sometimes that big businesses are co-opt their regulatory agencies. So,
Yes.
is part of the reason why the regulatory agencies with the 911 first responders not doing anything because really they're not operating in the interests of our citizens, but
Yeah, the responders rather
Yeah.
than the companies.
are they, you know,
Well, by the way, what you haven't mentioned in a sense is the fact that the entire change of administration in 2000 changed the entire outlook. Before 2000, that administration, or the administration at the time of the actual impact, had a tremendous surplus that they didn't know what to do with. And they immediately lowered the tax rates on the very wealthiest people. And so the entire financial climate in the country changed dramatically at the time of that change in administration. And it's something which was affected upon Wall Street in that the people on Wall Street really thought they were more untouchable than they had been previously, more, you know, unassailable. And, you know,
A lot of this stuff became deregulated, and
right,
that's why we ended up in the mess we're in today.
exactly right.
well, yeah, obviously. I mean, we were talking a little bit about the Occupy Wall Street, and we'll get to that
Beforehand, right.
Yeah, later on. So what you're saying is that in 2000 we had the Bush administration coming in, and
Yeah, exactly right. We had the Clinton administration leaving, and they left with this actual budgetary surplus. And the first thing that the Bush administration did was they said, hey, we can't accept a surplus. So they immediately went about and they lowered the tax rates on the very wealthiest, not on you and me. They lowered, you know, they increased the cost of government by invading all kinds of places that they really have no business in. And in turn, just in order to make things really worse, you then have 9/11, which is all by itself a tremendous calamity, which they tried to minimize because by that time they had already lowered the tax rates, et cetera, et cetera.
So the feeling was that if there was some arrogance on Wall Street, just giving the very wealthy even more of a tax break may have
Made a big difference, yeah, without
Made a
question
huge
whatsoever.
difference.
Made a huge difference, right?
So. One of the reasons, what we're trying to get to is what the 911 first responders talk about in sort of general terms is, well, we breathed into all this stuff and now we're sick, but they don't really know what the stuff is. So I was,
Concerned.
no, I was fascinated to learn that when you have plastic piping and it's
Oh, yeah, my
incinerated,
God, yeah, right.
and it's the PVC pipe, is that
Right,
correct?
right, yeah.
When that's incinerated, as it was in 9/11, or when you heat it up, it releases chlorine into the air, combining with the water
Yeah,
vapor
yeah,
to
yeah.
form the hydrochloric acid, which you breathed in. So, and it would have been highly likely that Mr. LeBeau, who now has chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, would have breathed in hydrochloric
It's a
acid.
possibility. At the same time, again, I don't know the exact rules that the World Trade Center was built under, but I do know that people are people, and if they can save money on pipe, they'll save money on pipe, among other things. So it's a real possibility. It is not absolutely assured, and I have not read this, but if you accept that plastic piping is used in any place, and you have a tremendous, conflagration or whatever you want to call it, 911 event, it's a very real possibility. And it's something which is not discussed in the press because the press is also, if I may,
Please, finish.
co-opted. You know what I mean? There's no
yeah.
question about it.
Thank you so much, because I say it openly that we have a controlled press,
Right.
and it wasn't this way when I was growing up. I think the press was, more honest and but there seems
Up front, right.
Yeah, there seems to me that the press is becoming, with as much respect as I can, because this is the free press here, but the regular corporate media press seems more like putting out
Exactly what they're told to put out, or what's expected of them.
right,
Yes.
right. And, you certainly exactly, and they're not
Right.
they're not as critical or objective as they used to be when I was growing up. Because I remember a press that would go after you. I remember more 60 Minutes type press than now. You watch with great respect. You watch the regular newscasts, and it's just so milquetoast. It's like, why do I even
Amen,
bother?
right.
The whole thing's so sanitized that you don't even want to,
You're worried about whether Ashton Kutcher is divorcing Demi right now. That's the big thing right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the, it's fluff stuff.
Exactly
It's
right.
not, it has no relevance to our lives. You wanted to ask some questions about cancer, because when you went down to Washington to fight for the Droga bill, did I pronounce it correctly?
The Droga bill, yes.
One of the things that Mr. LeBeau works with and for is advocating. John Field advocates with the Feel Good Foundation.
Yes.
And I think he's working on trying to get cancer added to.
Yes, that was one of the bones of contention with us trying to get the bill passed. They're trying to say that a lot of the cancer-causing materials, I'll give you an idea, hexavalent chromium 6, the rust inhibitor in the machinery,
You're right.
that's a super cancer-causing agent. That was found to have been within the pile, the debris itself. Then you have the asbestos, the PVC, the PCBs.
Possibility, right.
A lot of this stuff, it's shown in studies to be cancer-causing materials, but yet they're saying, well, we don't know if it's being caused. And they were saying, more study has to be done. But from our side, we're saying how many more people have to die of cancer
before the studies are proven, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look, normal cancers take maybe 20, 30 years before they begin to show up. We were having cancers show up in less than 5 years in a lot of people. And they're saying to us, well, we still don't know, and we have to do a lot more
it's a
studies.
huge put off.
Yeah, it's just, we're
It's
trying
an
to...
attempt to put off the day of reckoning.
Yeah.
That's a really good...
Until you have died, in which case it's a moot point.
Yeah, it's just...
Thank you very much. Because they did a lot of this with Agent Orange too. I mean, it was like,
exactly.
Play it down, don't talk about it, push it under the
The
rug.
funny part about Agent Orange, though, is that Elmo Zumwalt's son actually died of Agent Orange contamination. That is, the admiral that was one of the most strong proponents of the use of Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. His son actually died of Agent Orange contamination. It's beyond belief. That I was amazed at, but that's a sidebar. But anyway, so eventually things come by, but not often.
Yeah, not.
But that's one that's absolutely incontrovertible.
It's just not fast enough for some people.
Exactly right.
So the regulatory agencies, the people in that are supposed to provide health care to you and knowledge to your doctors, I was wondering how come the doctors aren't talking about this? And one of the things...
When they do, they're shut up. You have this Doctors Without Frontiers, Médecins Sans Frontières. Anyway, the idea is...
Doctors Without Borders?
Exactly, Without Borders. Anyway, the idea is that, what they have to say is universally ignored by the American press. The only thing that the American press wants to listen to is the AMA, which may have all kinds of reasons, regulatory and governmental, legalistic reasons for hiding things or for not making an issue of things.
And the people that are in charge right now of, like, the World Trade Center related medical studies and the treatment programs and everything is NIOSH.
Well, let me ask you something. The doctors who are supposed to treat you guys, do they have people like David Hunter to call, who's like a go-to person to say, well, I'm treating this person with this, that, and the other thing. Can you help me understand what they might have breathed in? Because I got to tell you, I went to medical school. We're not taught a lot of information. In biochemistry class, we're given minimum amounts of nutritional information. They just sort of throw it in as, we got
afterthought.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we're learning, biochemistry as a science hasn't changed in 15 years, but there's really good stuff that we should be talking about in terms of nutrition with patients. And we're not taught it. It is an afterthought. They threw in one little exercise, and we all copied from each other. And no, that's what we did. If I told you what really went on in medical school, you'd be a great deal more cautious in dealing with your doctors. But we're not taught any of this. The only person who would be hip and savvy to this would be like my friend. I have a friend, Colonel Riley, who ran a construction. He was president of a construction company. He was a civil engineer. He would appreciate this. before he went to medical school, he ran a construction company, so he would appreciate a lot. But most of the people that I went to school would have no appreciation. We don't know what's in those in these buildings.
Right.
Yep. So do any of these people have a resource person or go-to people like Mr. Hunter?
As far as I know, I haven't heard it.
So maybe
I haven't been. It could be true. It could be that they do have somebody, and that they're just bouncing information off of, or it just could be like you said. There's nobody there. There's just nobody there to.
Who would your
Well,
doctor?
they certainly don't want anyone who's going to give them anything other than what they expect. That's for certain. That is to say, they only want to get that which they can answer very easily and very quickly. And as soon as they get anything that's a little discordant, the game's over. That person is immediately shut up or pushed to a side. That's all there is to it.
That's a incredible disservice at best to the 911 first responders. They should be told about things like, we want to. I understand you don't want to scare people, but there is a very real risk that you could be passing along, birth defects to your children and grandchildren. I know that's hard to hear.
Shown.
Yeah, without question. Yeah, that's been shown.
But
because it's being, some of the women that were pregnant that were actually there, and were caught in the, they were caught in either the cloud,
right.
the explosions, or even they were caught in the rubble and were able to get out. These women are showing that their kids were born severe asthmatics, severe birth defects. Just a slew of medical problems are wrong with these kids. And the kids that were going to Stuyvesant High School, they're showing, a lot of them are still showing the same illnesses that we were showing on the pile.
So where do you, can I ask a really horrible question? This health data that's being collected on you guys as if you were, and I'm going to apologize for the phrase I'm going to use.
Just go ahead and say it, lab rats.
Yeah, you're basically a huge human. You're what's euphemistically referred to in medicine as a naturally occurring experiment, but basically you're
a lab rat.
You're a huge lab rat. Where do you go to find? Then they're collecting data on you, and they're a great white wall of silence, and they're not telling you what's going on. Where do you go to get that information so that you can protect your health, try to improve your health, or guard future generations? Where do you go?
Well, for somebody like me, I have to try and get my, I have to go by my medical records from them.
And
there's not much else that I can get, because I can't, if I ask for the studies and everything like that, I'm just not going to be given it.
They can't do. Can they do that, Mr. Hunter? Can they withhold this kind of information from?
Withholding is a big word. However, the fact of the matter is that they can very easily not put any of this information forward. That's a better way to put it. And also, the interpretation of the information is something which is subject to all kinds of variation. So you get some experts that say, hey, this is great information. You have other experts that say, oh, no, it doesn't matter at all. Witness the entire debate about the climate science.
Right,
you have,
right.
NASA scientists who are categorically saying, hey, we've got a real problem with the climate. And then we have U.S. senators that are saying, hey, it's the same climate that we had 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Nothing's changed.
Right.
So then what do you do in between?
Well, but it's irrefutable that you've inhaled mutagens, and you can show that
yeah, right.
And you can show that will cause birth defects in future generations. I can see where the government wouldn't want to deal with that because it'll be a nightmare that goes through children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I can see where a government that's going broke in a financial crisis doesn't want to pay anybody anything.
But mind you, they're only going broke because they decided that let's lower the taxes from 70% down to 25% or something. And by the way, if you're a hedge fund manager, your tax is only 15%. So yes, they are going broke, but yes, they're doing it because they invented the entire problem. They literally decided, hey, let's limit the tax collection. There was a time when corporations used to pay, I think it was 35% of as taxes on their income. Mm-hmm. Now they pay nothing.
Yeah. Prime example, BP.
Yeah, exactly right.
They made, $4 billion, $5 billion last year?
In the U.S. alone, I believe.
And they paid zero in taxes.
Or how about General Electric? They paid zero also, and General Electric is the largest American corporation going.
So you think that a lot of
it makes a huge difference. And by the way, again, 30 years ago, they used to pay taxes. They used to pay a fixed percentage of their income, period. Nowadays, they have all kinds of rules and escape clauses written into the rules, which allow them to get away without paying anything.
Now, we as the American taxpayer tried any of this stuff, we'd
You'd
be in
be sent
jail.
to jail, without question. Yes. But you don't have lobbyists whose sole job it is to provide the escape clauses, the loopholes that allow people that are making $100 million a year to make $200 million a year or $500 million, God only knows, or corporations, I should say.
So when I recommend that we have to take our government back,
It's a big order of business, let me tell you.
Yeah.
yeah. But I have to think about this for a minute because the kind of stuff we're talking about is really
It's pretty astounding.
it's sobering. Because I know in my experience what I deal with is people who create false records, make stuff up. I mean, I've got federal judges who refuse to uphold the law and they're making stuff up. And when I started telling this to people about how these false records are created, and I'm watching the flow of information, like to stay very concrete, I'm watching the flow of information, for example, just in my case. We went to Congressman Weiner's office. We provided evidence and information to the Bronx District Attorney, and the Bronx District Attorney's office wrote back to Congressman Weiner and wholesale lied. I mean, they just lied. They used a deceptive practice where they were quoting the law. This is Linda Tacoma. At the Bronx District Attorney, Assistant District Attorney Linda Tacoma. She's been a prosecutor for 22 years. She's fully aware of what she was saying. She was talking about a statute of limitations issue. The first thing you learn as a prosecutor is your statute of limitations, because you got to know whether you can prosecute someone or not. And she wholesale lied in an official communication to Congressman Weiner. I just had, most recently in the last few months, a Detective Ranahan at the 34th Precinct confirmed that I was correct and Linda Tacoma lied. And I'm like, do you understand that the Bronx District Attorney's Office is providing false and misleading information to an elected official to mislead him? I mean, that's huge. So we don't have to talk about it in these sort of vague, sort of nefarious terms where we have lobbyists and they're drafting laws with words and phrases that allows this. In my real life experience, that people are talking that I have a detective at the 34th Precinct who says, yes, Linda Tacoma, how did he phrase it? She knows she blew it. She didn't blow it. She knew exactly the lies that she was telling. Yeah, she was, she knowingly, willfully, intentionally, maliciously, with malice aforethought, throwing all those words that show she had criminal intent. And she deliberately misled Congressman Weiner, who's not an attorney, and was relying on that information. And this is just one concrete example. So, it's very frightening. And it's very frightening when you have people who are, managing. This is the way the truth is going, and they're making a false record so that they can mislead gatekeepers and decision makers this way. I mean, I presented. There's an attorney at the I have friends in the military. There's an attorney at the Pentagon who asked me a question about the federal judges in my case. I wanted to leave the focus on the 911, but since we've segued into lying to people, or lying to, so let me just finish with your permission, and then we'll but there's an attorney at the Pentagon named Major Coyne, and Major Coyne said, no, I believe in the federal judges. They would never lie. They would never fabricate. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll make these little videos for you. So I'm making this is for Major Coyne, these little videos, and I have law enforcement and other people check. And so I did this 20-minute, this little 20-minute video that I put up. And it's like on one point, the federal judge in my case wholesale made up this ruling that I, as a former student, couldn't access and correct my records from my medical school, which are falsified. My financial records, my medical records, my educational records. And the judge, fabricated this ruling. I'm like, this is the sentence. This is how it's wrong. And here are the words and phrases that he just, made up, wholesale made up. In my work, when I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm allowed to talk about it now because there was a big report in the New York Times. There's a big report in the New York Times. Take these words and phrases out. And I'm like, you can't really do that. You're making these false records. So it's not like some loose sort of nefarious thing. I really can point to concrete examples where the flow of information is manipulated to mislead people to commit crimes. We have that now. Yeah. So it's not. It's It's not something you just
It's
say.
a very interesting thing, yeah.
It's not interesting. It's frightening, actually. I mean, the Bronx District Attorney's Office is blatantly lying to Congressman Weiner, and I'm like wallpapering, the internet with it. I'm handing this out. I mean, immediately the responsible thing for the Bronx District Attorney's Office to do is to correct that. At the point where I'm wallpapering, the internet, I'm putting this all over the place, where Judge Patterson, who's a federal district judge, wholesale made up a ruling that I, as a former student, could not access and correct my records. In effect, that's what he said. That's a very dangerous ruling. That basically says your school. Where did you graduate architecture school from?
University of Pennsylvania.
Oh, the University of Pennsylvania. That's
right,
excellent.
Right.
So basically, this federal judge has manufactured a ruling that says the University of Pennsylvania could lie about your past, Mr. Hunter, and you, as a former student, couldn't do anything about it. I mean, that's just stupid. It defies common sense. So I appealed this to 3 judges. They sanctioned and endorsed it. I'm like, what kind of bozos are these? I'm not being respectful because they haven't earned my respect. So I do an en banc procedure, and I asked 35 federal judges to look at this, and they sanctioned and endorsed this. I'm like, the entire Second Circuit Court of Appeals, all these judges graduated from a law school, and they're all sitting there thinking, yes, we're former students of a law school. If our law school lied about our past, there's nothing we should do.
We have the right to lie about someone else's past.
Yeah, we
That's the buck.
And then I send in 2 subpoenas to 2 Supreme Court justices, and I heard this, they weren't valid subpoenas. The point of those subpoenas were to make Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who oversees the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, aware that her entire Second Circuit Court of Appeals has run amok, and now she needs to come and correct this, because if you're telling my medical school, which is the Albert Einstein College of Medicine of Yeshiva University, that you can lie about a student's past, that's really frightening. They did it to me. The proper corrective action that should be taken is that my case should be remanded to the federal judge. He should suck it up already and say, demand my presence, demand the presence of the attorneys who made the stuff up, and say, okay, I'm sucking it up now. What happened here was wrong, and now I'm going to correct it. That would be the proper corrective act. So this is not like...
Right.
No, he needs to do that, because when a medical school lies in financial information to steal money, the judge isn't just making stuff up. He's not just being impeached. He's committing a crime.
Oh, yeah. Yes, undoubtedly.
So, but
the number of judges, and by the way, the judiciary in the country has become more and more and more conservative even within the last 10 years. So the judiciary is not impartial.
No, they're not.
That's a real problem.
They're not an objective. They definitely have an agenda. They legislate from the bench. They wholesale repeal. They've run amok. So
At the same time, the people that are responsible for this change are the very same people who will turn around and claim that the judiciary should not legislate from the bench. And that's exactly what the judiciary that they have chosen does all the time.
And they wholesale. In my case, they wholesale repeal the law. They can't do that. Their job is to enforce the law, not repeal the law. So but we segued into me, and that wasn't what we were supposed to do today. We were supposed to stay on point. So, but basically on point is, we have just a few minutes left. I want to show your website again.
Oh, my God.
Listen, let me ask you something. Would you be willing to, Mr. LeBeau is going to make a series of specials to inform the 911 community. Would you be willing to?
Sure.
Okay, terrific, because you're like an ocean of wisdom. And you have no problem criticizing people.
Oh, you're exactly right.
So this is your the 911 first. I have to say this because the 911 first responders will love you for your candor. I'm sure they will. And I'm sure big government.
They won't be happy, but
no, they're not going to be happy at all.
But
the truth has to be gotten to.
Yeah, because what can
rights.
they're going to have to suck it up and just start telling the truth, because how long can you
how long can you hide this from us and leave us in the dark to try and fend our way through all this?
They will continue in what they're doing unless and until they get elected out of office. And so the only problem, which I look at potentially, is if they control the elections. That would be a real, because at the moment people are possessed of the notion that the elections are free and fair. They may be free. I'm not certain that they're all fair. And I say that because when I look at the results, I can't believe some of the results that I see. So again, the elections actually are capable of being stolen. That's really a serious thing, but it's entirely possible, because everyone that we talk about is always talking about how the people in office can be voted out of office, and yet we see people that are just without question, really malefactors, and at the same time they keep getting reelected.
Yeah, they just
and so I don't understand how this happens.
Well, part of it is because we don't have a mainstream press that's neutral and objective and willing to ask hard questions. When we say things like the press is manipulated and controlled, it really is. So
That's a real possibility, right? Again, it's like the thought that elections can be stolen, God knows. What I'm saying is, when I look at who gets elected, I have to ask, how are they elected?
One of the things that they were talking about yesterday in terms of the Occupy Wall Street is, okay, so now you've had the protest, but now you've got to start moving into concrete action, which is run your own officials. Start running candidates for office. Maybe one of the things that the 911 community can do, instead of, with great respect, just having a great big pity party, and I say that with great respect, why don't you start thinking about running your own candidates for office?
That's a possibility. But, first what you have to do is you have to be organized. You have to have a definite agenda. You have to have a platform.
Well, you were organized enough to get your own bill passed.
That's true, but that's because a small group got together
and did a lot of hard work.
So
what you need to do is start making your specials, organize your community, start doing outreach, and start letting the powers.
But by the way, there are a lot of people, I want to say very powerful people in this country, that are actually opposed to this. And so the classic example about organization and its failure is the congressman from Georgia who was actually defeated when he went to be reelected, when the guy was 100%. But there was a campaign against him. There was word of mouth. It was involved with all kinds of lies about his character. At the moment, I don't recall his name, but I remember distinctly that we had a veteran who had actually lost part of his arm or something. And in turn, this guy was defeated by extreme conservatives who got all kinds of money surreptitiously, because now you have this thing where you have corporate personhood for corporations, which in turn don't have to give out any identification whatsoever as to the amount of money, where it comes from, what it's doing. And so the point is that there are people that are opposed to the entire notion of allowing the overall people to get their voice heard. And they have very, very powerful positions because they have huge amounts of money. Again, it's all hidden by the corporate identity laws passed by the Supreme Court within the last year, or personhood laws. You literally do not have any ability whatsoever to find out, again, anything about who contributes, how much, et cetera, where, when, how. It's actually all opaque.
Suppression of information.
Exactly, but it's
character assassination to silence people. I'm like a case study, because that's basically what happened to me.
Happened, right?
No, it has happened to me. I'm a whistleblower. I discovered that, for example, there was a federal student loan fraud at my medical school. Another student who had been subjected to federal student loan fraud contacted me, asked me if I would be a witness. I said yes. We went down to Robert Morgenthau. I'm looking at the countdown clock. We went down to Robert Morgenthau's office, the district attorney, and asked for help. And instead, I've been subjected to character assassination that's like so beyond the pale that I actually have psychiatrists claiming I was never a medical school student. I'm like, it was just
in your imagination, right?
I'm like, excuse me, what planet are you on? My school confessed to fraud in the administration of federal student loans. They confessed to recruiting me based on promises that they would support student research 100%. And they said, yes, we promised Ms. Radin that if she came to our medical school, we would support student research 100%. We admit that her work was meritorious and she was on track to be a published author on 3 to 5 original clinical research papers. By the way, you should be impressed because there was a lot of work. Most doctors get a paper a year. That's great. I was getting 3 to 5. But we refused to support her work. So, we just lied to a prospective and enrolled students, and that happens to be, and I'm going to quote the law here, 34 CFR section 668.71b. My school confessed to fraud in the administration of federal student loans. So, when I blew the whistle and said, hey, you can't do that, you can't, and I was granted minority student status. You can't go out there and troll for minority students or students who have minority student status. I had minority student status for socioeconomic reasons. My brother and I were the first to go to college, and my parents had an elementary school education. My mother was a political refugee from World War II. She wanted to come to America. She believed in capitalism. She believed in democracy. She believed in entrepreneurship. She lived the American dream, and the tragedy for her is watching her daughter's American dream destroyed by things like, gee, when you catch the bad guys, they actually character assassinate you. So yeah, that's true. So, but you're not afraid of that. You're willing to speak out.
That's another story. My God.
Do you have a question?
Well, no. Men like this, we need more of, and we need them in government, because with people like him, our country can get back on course.
Are you considering running for office?
Oh no, I'm too old. Oh my
What?
God.
Are you kidding? In Washington, you're like a spring chicken.
Exactly.
If you're not like 50,
Exactly.
you have to. No, seriously. If you're like, you have to be like, you have to be at least over 55 to be taken seriously. Otherwise, you're just a kid. No, seriously. When I went down to Washington, they were like, well, you're just a kid. What do you know? Come back.
The funny thing is, when you actually see these guys up front, they're even more decrepit than I am. It's unbelievable.
Oh, believe me, I've seen them.
Yeah, really. I am amazed. Actually, when I look at it, some of them can barely walk. I'm telling you. And for that matter, and I have a lot of respect for this guy Lautenberg, but after the cancer, he's an entirely different person.
Do you think so?
Oh yeah, and I don't mean it negatively, because he's one of the few people actually stands up for what he thinks, et cetera, and he actually is against all kinds of things like cancer and all that, which is really meritorious. But what I'm saying, the cancer made a big difference even on Lautenberg, because he had been very active beforehand, and he's actually, his appearance has changed, not just his demeanor, but actually his appearance.
He was there with us when we got the bill signed.
Yeah, right. No. He's a very good senator. He's one of the few really good senators. But again, he can't beat cancer either, despite all of his immense wealth.
Yeah, no matter how much money you got,
you've got a problem if you have that. Yeah, without question. Yes.
No amount of money will save you from that.
Right.
So one of the proactive steps that was being talked about was maybe the Wall Street, the Occupy Wall Street people, and maybe some people from your community, and maybe we should recruit Mr. Hunter to run for office, is to start running your own elected officials. It's interesting that you commented on election fraud, because I have I'm not allowed to talk about this because they're still gathering evidence, but they're gathering evidence about forged signatures in election fraud, and they asked me that when they felt that they were on solid legal ground and had enough evidence, if they could come and share that. I'm like, yeah. So maybe the solution here is not to sit back and just gripe, but actually start running for office, start running your own candidates. That's why I had Dr. Stephen DeLuca here. He was running for Hudson County Exec, and I actually had to write a little field manual, how to run a political, how to start your political campaign on $500 or less. So it wouldn't be on. Right. No, yeah, you actually can. You can be very effective.
Oh, by the way, so as we're wide-ranging our discussion.
Okay.
Among other things, it really affects me or bothers me is the whole notion that in order to run for office, you've got to do it with your own funds or some funds that you've managed to garnish from someone else. By rights, I should think that eventually this country would get to a situation where the public provides the funds and does not have this entire, really nefarious kind of under-the-table corporate welfare for the selected few that proceed to use untold amounts of money in order to buy the elections.
And it becomes
beyond
a big
belief.
That's a great point,
right? No,
really, it's beyond belief. The corruption involved with the entire American electioneering system is almost incredible to behold.
Because the whole point of being a candidate is to raise huge amounts of money to
exactly.
fuel this meeting.
Beholding to all of these special interests.
Right.
And then you look the other way when they write all these loopholes, et cetera, and then the taxes become something different than what the general public thinks they ought to be.
And it's one would think, I want to keep an eye on the time, but in the British system, they have much shorter election cycles.
And they're all subsidized.
And
exactly right.
So we
they're
should
not allowed to spend. And also the British allow, or not allow, they require that any source of money whatsoever be identified immediately. The whole notion about you're a corporate, a person, and therefore you can hide your contributions, that's completely not allowed.
Now, don't they also have shorter term limits? It's like you do 1 or 2 terms and then that's it? You've done your service?
I'm not certain of that. I don't mean it, I just don't know. But I also do know that this whole notion that Mayor Bloomberg decided that he was going to go from 2 to 3 terms, that is beyond goddamn belief.
Yeah, he overturned his own law.
Exactly, exactly right. He overturned his own law.
Well,
and by the way,
there was pushback, so and they went back to the term limits. So there was pushback.
Yeah, but unfortunately, he got away with what he did.
Yeah,
and
because
he should not have been allowed to get away with it. Among other things, this guy made $4.5 billion in 1 year with a financial meltdown. In the year 2008, this guy declared an income of $4.5 billion. He made money as the mayor because literally, as the city went down, he went up. And no one says a word about it.
Yeah, and that's
and
the
part
sad
of
fact that
and part of what he
shows part of the social and economic disconnect from the country.
But no, part of what he
Exactly
did, which just buys into what we're talking about, part of what he did was he spent a lot of money convincing communities like the African American community that he represented their interests.
And he doesn't
did.
at all.
He doesn't.
He represents his own interest.
He doesn't.
Exactly right.
So I mean, so that's the point of spending all this money to change attitudes and to provide false and misleading information.
Oh yeah, right.
So free press is something free press.
It's something we sorely miss.
Yeah,
sorely miss.
And free press save lives. Literally, it's saving mine. So.
I'm sorry.
No, it is. Thank you, Time Warner Cable. But literally, if I couldn't get my voice out there on the
Right.
internet and on public access, and I didn't know how to write field manuals for how to start a political campaign on $500 or less, or how to access free online databases, and there weren't people like Mr. LeBeau who was guarding my life, I'd be dead today. So thank you, Time Warner Cable. Thank you, M&N. But yes, there needs to be reform. We've got 2 minutes left, so let's go to Mr. David Hunter's website. And he's an ocean of wisdom. He is an expert in architecture and building, and this is his website. These are the services that he offers. And
some very impressive stuff, I might add.
And yes, he is a legal expert. So I'm sure people from 911 community will be calling you. And these are his projects. And you can see he does some very impressive work. And I want to leave this as we're going out. So thank you so much. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You have an open invitation, and you will be, I'm sure you're going to get calls, and you're going to be on Mr. LeBeau's show when he gets it. And so we're going to surf your web a little bit, your internet.